My family mocked my handmade journal and treated me like nothing, but when a fire proved it was priceless, I took my revenge by denying them forever. I'm a 29-year-old woman from a middle-class family that doesn't do feelings. Not openly, not intentionally, not ever. If you grew up in my house, you learned early that birthdays were for people who needed attention, holidays were excuses to waste money, and personal gestures were a kind of weakness. The most emotion you'd get was a nod or an all right then. No hugs, no long talks, no we're proud of you. It wasn't cruel, just cold. I was the weird one. I liked making things. Tiny things. Handwritten notes, pressed flower bookmarks, personalized cards, sketchbook gifts. For my mom's 50th birthday, I made a collage with all her childhood pictures I'd secretly gathered. She looked at it once and said, "You should have just gotten me a cake and left it on the counter for days." That's when I learned to stop trying. At 22, I moved out and got a job in the city as a product designer. I started a quiet life, nothing flashy but mine. I built routines and made friends who actually liked celebrating things. I gave small gifts without expecting anything in return. Still, I never brought anything to family gatherings again. Not a card, not a dessert, nothing. They noticed at first and made comments like, "Where's your homemade thing this time?" But I just smiled and shrugged. Eventually, they stopped asking. Then came Avery's engagement dinner. Avery is my cousin. We were close when we were kids, mostly because she was one of the few people who didn't make fun of my craft projects. As we grew older, that closeness faded. But I still remembered how we used to make up songs in the backyard and build forts with old sheets. So, when her engagement was announced, I thought maybe I'd try once more. Just one thing, not a big gesture, just something meaningful. I made her a memory journal. It took me weeks. I printed old photos, scanned family recipes, and added quotes from letters my grandparents had written to each other during the war. I pressed forget-me-nots from my grandmother's garden between vellum pages. I included a fold-out page of our family tree, handwritten in ink. I even hand-bound the entire book with linen thread and wrapped it in brown craft paper tied with twine. There wasn't a single glittery sticker or overdone calligraphy title. It was quiet, simple, real. I brought it to the dinner. We were seated around a long table in my aunt and uncle's house, with mismatched chairs and plates from different sets. Avery was at the head, glowing in that way newly engaged people do. Everyone brought standard gifts, envelopes, wrapped kitchenware, a toaster. When it was my turn, I handed over the journal, smiling. She unwrapped it slowly. I watched her eyes move over the cover. She flipped a few pages. Then my aunt leaned in, glanced at it, and said, "That's a bit much, isn't it?" Micah, another cousin, snorted. "What is this, one of those Pinterest projects? Nobody actually keeps those." I laughed lightly, pretending I hadn't just felt something shift in my chest. Avery gave me a small thank you but didn't look me in the eye. No one asked to see it. It sat on the table like a misplaced dish. During dinner, conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Someone brought up a new job. Another mentioned a baby on the way. When I tried to join in, the topic shifted. After dessert, I helped stack plates in the kitchen. That's when I heard my uncle's voice low behind me. She always has to make it about herself. I left before anyone could offer leftovers. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. I walked to my car, journalless, dignity folded into the corners of my jacket. That night, I didn't sob or scream. I just sat on my apartment floor, wondering why I thought it would be different, wondering if I'd always be the person who cared too much in a family that felt nothing at all. Weeks passed. I didn't talk to anyone about that dinner, not even my friends. I focused on work, filled extra time reorganizing my bookshelves, and digitized my old art files. I even considered deleting the backup I'd kept of Avery's journal on my computer, just to forget the whole thing ever happened. Then, 2 months later, everything changed. My phone rang on a quiet Thursday evening. It was Avery. I almost didn't answer. When I picked up, her voice was shaky. Her apartment had caught fire, not major, but smoke and water damaged everything. She'd lost all her photo albums, handwritten notes, paper keepsakes, everything except the journal. She said it had been sitting on her coffee table. The firefighters moved it aside when spraying down the area. It was untouched. She stayed up all night reading it. She cried through it. She told me it was the only thing she had left from her childhood that felt real. I told her I didn't keep the files. I lied. She thanked me again and hung up. No mention of what anyone else had said at the dinner. No apology for the laughter, just quiet gratitude. The next day, I opened the backup folder on my laptop and stared at the files, every page, every image, every caption. Then I created a new folder. I named it Now You Get It, and I started saving things. Not for them, for me. A few weeks after the engagement dinner, I got another call from Avery. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Her voice came through shaky and rushed. There had been a fire in her apartment. Nothing major, she said, but it destroyed most of her things. Photo albums, paper records, letters, souvenirs, gone. The only thing that survived was the memory journal. She'd left it on her coffee table, and it was somehow untouched. She said she stayed up all night reading through it for the first time. It felt like her childhood had been handed back to her. I didn't bring up the way everyone looked at the journal during dinner, like it was an embarrassing school project. I didn't ask if she remembered how no one passed it around. She didn't mention it either. Then she asked if I still had the original files, the photos, the layouts, the templates. I told her I hadn't saved them. That was a lie. I had everything backed up and cataloged on my laptop. 2 days later, I got a message from her mother. It was phrased like a compliment but shaped like a request. She wrote that Avery's gift had touched the whole family, and she wondered if I could make a version of it for everyone. She used words like healing and preserving our history. I replied politely, saying I didn't have time right now, but I'd let her know. The next day, Micah's fiancé reached out. She wanted a version for their wedding. She said she was planning a memory table and thought it would be the perfect centerpiece. This time, she offered to pay. I told her no. I explained I'd only made that book as a one-time thing for Avery specifically. She didn't respond. After that, it didn't stop. My sister-in-law texted me, asking if I could make one for my niece's birthday. My cousin Jenna emailed to ask if I'd consider doing one for her parents' anniversary. Even my own mother reached out through a text message that just said, "I didn't get it back then. I do now." I started taking screenshots of every message, every comment, every "we didn't realize, and we see the value now." I saved them in a folder on my desktop and named it "Now You Get It." The next weekend, I was at my parents' place for Sunday lunch. My father pulled me aside after the meal. We stood in the hallway next to the laundry room while the rest of the family chatted in the living room. He said my mother felt left out and hurt. He asked if I could make something for her too, something like what I gave Avery. I looked at him and said, "But no one asked for it, remember?" Then I walked away. He didn't follow. On Monday, I received a forwarded message from Jenna that had been shared in the extended family group chat. It was a picture of the journal Avery had posted with a caption about how much it meant to her. People were reacting with hearts and comments like "so beautiful" and "what a treasure." I wasn't in the group chat. I never had been. Later that day, Avery messaged me privately to say thanks again. She told me she'd started writing in the blank pages at the back. She'd added her own reflections, photos from the fire, and printed copies of emails people had sent her after reading the journal. She said it felt like the only real family thing she owned. I didn't reply right away. I spent the evening going through the backup folder on my laptop. I opened each design, skimmed through the captions, and made a few updates. Not for anyone else, just for myself. Then I opened a fresh file and started creating a timeline, something I could add to quietly. I didn't know what I was making yet, but I knew it wouldn't be for sale. That night, Micah's fiancé followed up again. She said she understood if I was busy, but wanted to know if I'd reconsider. I left it on read. 2 more people reached out that week. One was a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. The other was my mother's sister. Both mentioned how the family had changed their perspective and were reevaluating what matters. I didn't engage with either. I just added their names to the screenshot folder. At the end of the week, I dropped off a package at the post office. It wasn't for anyone in the family. It was a custom journal I'd made for a friend going through a divorce. She didn't ask for it, and she didn't expect it. She cried when she received it. I didn't post about it or tell anyone. It wasn't about proving anything. Avery called again on Saturday night just to chat. She told me she was thinking of writing her own keepsake book using the journal as a guide. I told her that was a great idea. I meant it. By Sunday, the family group chat had changed its profile photo to a screenshot of one of the pages from the journal. Again, I wasn't added. Avery sent me the picture and just wrote, "Guess they're finally paying attention." I responded with a thumbs up emoji. Then I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it "Not for Them." A few days after the group chat changed its photo to the journal page I designed, I got a voicemail from my mother. Her voice had that sharp tone she used when she felt cornered but didn't want to sound angry. She said I was always acting like the victim, that I had a tendency to take things too personally and that they just didn't understand my style before. She ended it with, "You're making this harder than it has to be." I didn't reply. I saved the voicemail and moved on. Later that afternoon, I opened an email from my aunt. The subject line was a family request. She wrote that it was really selfish not to share the journal with the rest of the family, especially since everyone now saw how talented I was. She threw in a line about how family should lift each other up, not hoard things out of pride. I forwarded the email to myself and archived it in the same folder as the screenshots. That night, Avery texted me a photo. She was sitting on her floor, holding the journal with tear-streaked cheeks, smiling. The caption just said, "This is all I have now. Thank you." I told her I was glad it brought her comfort, but I also told her gently that I wasn't going to make copies for anyone else. She replied a few minutes later and said she understood. And that was it. No pressure, no side comments, just real understanding. That meant more than anything. The next family event was a baby shower for my cousin Jenna. It was hosted at my aunt's house. White balloons, plastic folding tables, a pile of diapers arranged like a cake. I showed up exactly on time, wearing neutral colors, carrying nothing. No gift bag, no ribbon-wrapped envelope. I walked in, found a seat near the window and sat down. Someone, probably Micah, judging by the voice, muttered from behind me. I guess she learned her lesson. I didn't turn around. I stayed quiet through the small talk and compliments on the decorations. The food was standard, a tray of finger sandwiches, a slow cooker full of dip, store-bought cupcakes in pastel wrappers. They passed around tiny bottles of bubbles and prepackaged party favors, like everything was picture perfect. No one asked me to participate in the games. No one asked how I was doing. I didn't offer anything either. At the end, just as I was slipping on my coat, Avery came over and hugged me tight. She didn't let go for a few seconds. Then she leaned in and whispered, "They don't deserve you. I just wanted you to know that." I nodded and left. That night, I opened my design software and pulled up the original journal file. I extracted the cover design and printed it in a high-resolution frame. I hung it in my living room above my reading chair. It wasn't labeled. No explanation, just the image. I took a photo of it, intentionally blurred, and posted it on social media with a caption that said, "It's okay if they never understood you. You were never making it for them." The post got 3 likes, one from a distant cousin, one from an old high school friend in Narcotics Anonymous, one from Avery. A few hours later, a message popped up from another relative. They said they saw the post and wanted to ask again, could I please reconsider doing a version for the whole family? They even offered to pay for supplies and give me full creative freedom. I left it on read. The next morning, my father texted me about Sunday lunch. I ignored it. That afternoon, Jenna tagged me in a post with photos from the baby shower. I wasn't in any of them. My name wasn't mentioned, but the comments under the photos kept circling the same theme. How wonderful it was to see everyone together. How family always finds its way back. How love wins. I closed the app and didn't go back. 3 days later, someone mailed me a postcard with no return address. It was just a typewritten message that said, "We all make mistakes. Don't let yours be walking away." I recognized my mother's phrasing immediately. I tore the card in half and tossed it in the recycling. That weekend, Avery called. She told me she had shown the journal to 2 of her close friends, people I barely knew. One of them cried. The other asked if I ever took commissions. Avery didn't pressure me. She just said, "You should know it matters." On Sunday, instead of going to lunch, I visited a bookstore I hadn't been to in years. I bought a blank journal with thick pages and stitched binding. When I got home, I wrote the first line inside the cover, "You don't owe them anything, not even an explanation." That evening, I went to dinner with a friend from work. When I got home, I found another message waiting, this time from Micah's fiancée. She asked if we could talk as adults, and said she felt like things had gotten blown out of proportion. I didn't respond. I opened my laptop, clicked through the folder marked "Now You Get It," and added the new messages. Then I opened the folder titled "Not For Them" and added one more entry, "Refusing to shrink for people who never saw you clearly isn't bitterness. It's clarity." The first thing I noticed was that Micah's fiancée had unfollowed me on social media. Then came her story post, not directed at anyone but clear enough, a blurry sunset with the words "Some people withhold out of spite and call it boundaries." It sat there for 24 hours, long enough for half the family to see it and pretend they didn't. I didn't respond. I archived the post in the screenshot folder with the others. 2 days later, my mother called. She kept her tone light, but the message was sharp underneath. She said my attitude was creating division in the family, that people were starting to feel like I was being cold on purpose. I reminded her that when I brought the gift to Avery's engagement dinner, they all laughed. She didn't argue. She went quiet for a few seconds and then asked if I was coming to dinner at my brother's house the next weekend. I said yes. That was the end of the call. The dinner started like all of them do. Too many dishes, mismatched chairs, background noise from the television. I noticed immediately that my name card was on the corner of the table, far from the center of conversation. My uncle and aunt were seated directly across from each other in the middle, as always. I sat where they put me. No one moved their chairs. Halfway through dinner, while someone was clearing plates, I overheard my uncle tell my aunt, "She thinks she's some kind of artist now." And my aunt responded, "It's not even her job." I said nothing. Later, my brother handed me his phone and asked me to take a group photo. Everyone gathered near the dining room archway. I took 3 pictures, handed back the phone, and stepped out of the frame. No one asked me to join. I drove home in silence. The next week was my niece's 10th birthday. I'd been working for months on a little booklet for her. Hand-drawn illustrations paired with original bedtime stories. It had her name on the cover with tiny sketches of things she loved. Dolphins, cupcakes, her cat. I mailed it with a note inside the cover, "To your dreams, whatever they become." I didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then my sister-in-law sent a short message. "Wow, that's a bit too much, isn't it? A Barbie doll would have done fine. No emojis." "No thank you." Later that night, Avery messaged me. She said she saw the booklet when she stopped by to drop off a gift. She called it beautiful. She said, "You're good at this. Don't let them flatten you." That stayed with me. I pulled out one of my blank journals and started writing again. Not about them. Just what I saw, what I heard, what they said. Not even feelings, just facts. I made a list of every event since the engagement dinner. What was said, what wasn't. I didn't plan to do anything with it. I just wanted the record to exist somewhere other than my head. A few days later, I got 2 unexpected messages. Both were from distant family friends who had seen Avery's journal when she brought it to a dinner. One asked if I'd ever consider doing something like that professionally. The other offered to pay me to create a keepsake book for her daughter's graduation. I declined both. I thanked them but told them I wasn't taking on projects. I didn't want to turn something personal into a product. The next surprise came from my aunt. She created a new group chat called Reunion Planning. It included almost every adult in the family, everyone except me. I found out because Avery sent me a screenshot of the chat's name and the participants list. Her message read, "You didn't miss anything. It's all Pinterest boards and potluck rules." That same night, I opened my design software and started something new. I created a family tree, but instead of including every name, I left them all out, just me and Avery. One line branching into 2 names. Underneath, I wrote the words, "Not everyone belongs in every story." I didn't save it to the shared family folder. I didn't print it. I just let it exist on my screen for a while before closing the laptop. The next morning, my mother sent me a message with a photo of an old scrapbook from her closet. It was dusty and yellowed, pages curling at the edges. The caption was, "Maybe it's time I looked at this again." I didn't respond. That evening, I received a calendar invite labeled Memory Night, tentative, sent by my brother. The location was our parents' house. The note said, "Bring anything meaningful to share." I declined the invite without adding a comment. The next day, Avery called. She told me she had mentioned my name in the reunion chat, and the reaction was mixed. Some ignored it. One person left the group chat altogether. She said she was thinking of doing the same. I told her she didn't need to make a scene. She could just step out quietly the same way I did. We agreed on that. At the end of the week, I made another entry in my journal, just a sentence. If they wanted me silent, they shouldn't have handed me paper. 2 weeks before Micah's wedding, the announcement went up on the family group chat I still wasn't part of. Avery sent me a screenshot. It read, "Excited to share that we're featuring a custom family memory wall at the wedding. Bring your favorite printed photo." A few of the older cousins commented with heart emojis. Someone replied, "Love this idea." Avery's message came next, straight to me. "Please tell me you're involved with that. It looks like a cheap knockoff of your book." I hadn't been asked. No one mentioned it to me. I checked the wedding website. Under details, there was a preview photo of the memory wall setup, a long corkboard with string lights, paper cutouts, and printed photos. Some blurry, some cropped awkwardly. But in the bottom corner, I noticed something else. One of the layouts was identical to a page I had designed for Avery's journal. The same font pairing, the same spacing, even the title reused word for word. I sent a direct message to Micah's fiancée. I kept it short, you could have just asked. The reply came fast. She said it was just family history and that no one owned it. She told me I was being dramatic. Then she added, "It's not like you're the only creative person in this family." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up my copyright registration from earlier this year, the one I had filed quietly after Avery's journal caught so much attention. I attached the legal documentation to an email and sent it to her with the subject line, "Cease and desist, unauthorized use of copyrighted layout." I didn't add a message, just the file. 12 hours later, my uncle left me a voicemail. He called me unstable and said I was trying to ruin a wedding over scraps of paper. That same evening, my aunt emailed me to say I had lost perspective and that I should be flattered. Anyone wanted to use my work at all. I forwarded both to my screenshot folder. Then I turned off notifications. Avery messaged me again later that night. She told me she was considering stepping down from the bridal party. She didn't like what was happening and didn't want to stand next to people who treated creativity like decoration. I told her not to do that. I told her to go but not to stay quiet. The next few days were radio silence from everyone else. Then, just before the weekend of the wedding, Avery sent me a photo from the rehearsal dinner. The memory wall was still up, but some of the pages had been replaced. It looked patchy and rushed, like someone had pulled pieces down last minute. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. I made tea, opened my sketch pad, and started drafting something new. No messages came through until that evening when Avery forwarded a short video that had been posted by one of the guests. It showed the reception hall. The camera zoomed in on the memory wall, now completely covered with a white cloth. The person filming was whispering, "Anyone know why they suddenly covered the whole thing? Weird." The clip was uploaded to a local wedding gossip account and started gaining views. I didn't engage, but someone tagged me in the comments, "Wasn't this your design?" I left it alone. Instead, I opened a new file on my laptop. I started building a timeline of our family's history, not the official version, the real one. I included things like the year my mother stopped celebrating birthdays, the summer I gave my aunt a hand-sewn pillow and found it in the trash weeks later, the Christmas where my drawing was the only gift that didn't get passed around. I listed names, dates, patterns. I added Avery's name first, then mine. I scanned handwritten notes from years ago, transcribed voicemails, and arranged photos they never remembered I took. I made it detailed, emotional, and brutally honest. I wasn't making it for them. I wasn't looking for a stage. A few days later, I received an email from one of the wedding vendors. They said they were contacted to remove the memory wall installation after a last-minute legal issue. They asked if I could clarify what the problem had been. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to my folder, renamed it Rewrites. Avery called the next day. She told me people were talking, some saying I had overreacted, others quietly agreeing with me. She told me someone made a comment at the wedding that the whole situation made people uncomfortable, which, coming from this family, meant it was finally getting under their skin. She asked what I was working on. I told her it was something that wasn't meant for a wall, or a post, or a wedding. I told her it was a version of our family story that didn't need decoration. She asked if she could read it someday. I said maybe, but not yet. That night, I printed the first page of the timeline. I slipped it into the back of the same journal I had started months ago, the one labeled Not For Them. At the top of the page I wrote, "They borrowed my voice without asking. Now they don't get to hear it at all." A week after Micah's wedding, I got a call from my father. We hadn't spoken one-on-one in months, not since I turned down his request to make something for my mother. He asked if we could meet. No family around, just us. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near the old neighborhood where we used to live. He arrived on time, already seated in the corner booth with a coffee in front of him and a paper bag on the table. He pushed the bag toward me. Inside was a small, worn notebook with a blue cover, my old doodle journal from when I was about 9. I hadn't seen it in decades. He said he'd found it while organizing boxes in the attic. He told me he'd read every page. He said I had been telling stories all along and no one had bothered to read them. I nodded. I thanked him for keeping it. Then he asked if I'd reconsider coming back to the family group. He said they could really use someone creative to help with the upcoming reunion. I didn't raise my voice or argue. I just said no, not in anger, just final. I told him I wasn't part of that story anymore, not in the way they were trying to write it. Word of our meeting traveled fast. That same evening, I got a message from my aunt. She said maybe it was time we all forgive and forget. She asked if I could help them move forward. Then Micah sent a message. He didn't apologize. He said he didn't mean to upset me, and that he just didn't realize how seriously I took things. He included a smiley face. The next morning, my sister-in-law posted a story on Instagram with old family photos. She tagged me and added the caption, "When creativity runs in the family." I blocked her without a word. Avery called me later that night. She said the group chat had turned into a performance. Everyone trying too hard, making plans, pretending like the last few months hadn't happened. She told me she wanted to leave the chat altogether. I told her she didn't have to do anything dramatic. I said living honestly would always say more than any exit ever could. The same night, I came home to find a letter in my mailbox. No envelope, just a 4-page handwritten note from my mother. Her handwriting hadn't changed in years. She wrote that I was always too sensitive as a child, that she didn't understand me back then. She wrote that she now saw how it cost me to keep showing up and being dismissed. She didn't apologize directly, but she wrote about watching old videos and finally noticing how quiet I was at every gathering. She wrote, "Maybe you were right to stop giving. Maybe we were wrong not to notice." I folded the letter and placed it in the back of the new journal I'd been working on, the one titled, "Not for Them." The next day, I wrote the final line of the last page in that journal. Just one sentence: "They laughed at the first gift. They won't get a second." 3 days later, my father called again. I didn't answer. He sent a message saying the reunion was scheduled for next month, and they would love it if I brought something special. I didn't reply. That weekend, Avery came by for tea. She brought lemon scones and a stack of photos she'd found in an old storage box. We spent an hour flipping through them, pointing out who was where, who had changed, who had stayed the same. She told me she had muted the family chat and was thinking of taking a long break from it entirely. Before she left, she handed me one of the photos. It was from when we were kids, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on the front porch of my parents' house, covered in marker ink, surrounded by scraps of construction paper. She said, "This is the last time I remember anyone being honest in that house." That night, I added a new section to the timeline I'd been building. I called it the Turning Years. I listed every event from Avery's engagement dinner to the wedding fiasco. Under each one, I wrote one sentence, not a memory, but a truth, the kind of truth no one says out loud until the damage is already done. Then, I backed up the file in 3 places. The next morning, my inbox had 2 more messages. One was from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, asking if I'd make just a small version of the journal for their parents' anniversary. The other was from my uncle, forwarding an old photo and writing, "See, you were always part of this." I opened both, then deleted them. That evening, I printed the timeline and bound it quietly. I used thick paper, soft thread, a linen cover. No titles, no names, just pages that finally felt like mine. It had been almost a year since I stepped into my parents' house. I hadn't planned to return, but Avery called on a Wednesday and asked me to come to Sunday lunch. She said she wanted to announce her pregnancy in person, and she wanted someone in the room who would actually smile for real. I agreed. I made it clear to her I wasn't showing up for them, I was showing up for her. When I arrived, my aunt was already standing near the doorway with a wine glass in hand. She gave me a smile that looked practiced, then tilted her head. "Look who decided to grace us," she said. I walked past her without responding. My mother handed me a plate like it was any normal day. There were no questions, no awkward apologies, no effort to pretend the last year had happened. I took the plate, thanked her quietly, and sat at the edge of the table. Everyone else filled the seats like nothing had changed. Dinner moved slowly. Comments about the weather, about my cousin's new apartment, about someone's toddler starting preschool. Nobody brought up the journal or the wedding or the memory wall. They acted like it had all been erased. Dessert came out on paper plates. Avery tapped her glass with a spoon and stood. She announced her pregnancy with a small smile and a steady voice. A few gasps, a handful of claps, some obligatory cheers, the kind people give when they know they're supposed to. I clapped too because I meant it. Then, someone near the end of the table, probably Micah, though I didn't look, asked with a grin if I was going to make another one of my emotional scrapbooks as a baby gift. A few people chuckled under their breath. I looked at him, met his eyes, and said clearly, "No, I learned my lesson." The table froze. No one reached for their coffee. The only sound was a fork clinking on a plate. My father cleared his throat and said, "Maybe we're the ones who need to catch up to you." My mother let out a sharp exhale and muttered, "Let's not make this sentimental again. Not everything needs to be deep." Avery didn't sit back down. She looked at them all and said, "But some things should be, and maybe if we'd learned that earlier, we'd treat each other better." Nobody answered. I didn't stay for coffee. I helped clear my plate, then stood to leave. I hugged Avery at the door. She held on a little longer than usual. I told her, "You'll be a good mom because you actually noticed people." She blinked fast but didn't cry. The next week, I opened the family group chat, the one they had finally added me to after all these months, and quietly deactivated it. I didn't say anything. I didn't post a farewell. I just removed myself. No one messaged me about it. That same week, I finalized a project I'd been working on quietly for months. I launched a small, anonymous line of custom journals. No branding, no backstory, just carefully designed books with blank pages and thoughtful prompts for people who wanted to make sense of their own memories. I didn't attach my name. I didn't promote it to anyone I knew. The first few orders came from strangers. Then a familiar name popped up in the order queue, J. Bro. Micah, no last name, no message, just an address and a quantity of 1. I fulfilled the order like I did all the others. I chose the linen cover, the heavier pages, the clean layout with room to breathe. I wrapped it in brown paper, tied it with twine, and added one line inside the front cover. You laughed at the first gift. You won't get another, but maybe you'll finally understand this one. A week later, I got an order from someone else in the family. I didn't respond. I refunded it and moved on. Avery called to tell me she had finally left the group chat too. She said she didn't make a big deal of it. She just slid out the way I had, quiet and clean. I told her that was all I'd ever hoped for, not to pull anyone with me, just to show them where the door was if they ever wanted out. That weekend I took a walk with my camera and shot the cover for my next journal, an empty bench under a blooming tree, no people, just space. I came home, filed it under Not For Them, and started a new folder for anyone who's listening.